Oh my god, I'm nervous. I'm nervous. I really want to do this video, but I'm nervous. Okay, so here it goes. My intention for today's video is to talk about racism or racial bias at work and what we can do to try and create more equality and more opportunities for Black people, but also for minorities in the working place. A lot of the issues that we've seen in the news, maybe in our personal lives, maybe through the connection of someone that we know, is issues around racism, police brutality, white supremacy, the oppression of Black people, Black slavery. So much history and so much of it is still present. And George Floyd's death and the movement has really brought to the forefront some of the wounds, pain, frustration, anger, and feelings that so many people around the world have. This video is not going to be about that. There are so many resources for it, and even though I'm a Black person, even I am still being educated on some of the issues. The real purpose of this video is to really start to discuss some of the issues that I feel aren't being talked about enough and the issues affecting the Black community, which is racism or racial bias at work. Now, as you can see, I am a Black person, I'm a Black woman, and I am quite dark. In addition to that, my actual obsession is helping women progress and develop a career they love. So I wanted to kind of give my perspective on this issue and hopefully facilitate a conversation that you and I can have. So if you have any thoughts on anything that I mentioned, please leave a comment in the box below, because I really want to continue this conversation. But there is one rule, which is to be as kind as possible to everyone in this community, because I feel the only way we can actually have an honest and vulnerable conversation about this is if we're not finger pointing at each other and we're not trying to blame one another, if we can actually try and we can be kind to one another so we can actually hear one another. Some of the issues that I'm going to be mentioning are not black and white, even though the issues are of black and white nature, and instead they're a little bit gray, or shall I say mixed. So stay tuned till the end to really hear some of these things and to also see what you can do, whether you're a Black person or whether you are not Black and maybe you are an employer and you're employing Black talent in the future. All right, so let's get cracking into this video. If you're new to my channel, hi, my name is Joy Randolph, and I'm a high performance coach who helps women get their dream job and be among the best at what they do. On this channel, I share with you how to get hired for an amazing job, in addition to how to create a career and life you love and not get burnt out along the way. If you want to watch videos like this, come and join us and subscribe. I post new videos every week. One of the things that a lot of people don't know about me is that in addition to working with women directly through my online courses and through my private coaching, I also work with organizations who want to recruit and retain female talent. Usually these are in STEM fields, so a lot of times it's usually in tech, and I really help them figure out ways to not only identify the best female talent, but also develop them to be among the best in their team so that we can have more women in leadership positions. Because of my experience in that, this is really the lens that I'm coming from. Now, before I really dive really deep into this, I should probably share a little bit about my experience as a Black person so you can understand the lens that I'm seeing things through, because I do believe that when we're talking about Black lives, whenever you're having a discussion, all of us are coming into it through a different lens. So that, let's say for example, it's a white person that's looking at the issue through their white privilege, or whether you're a Black person who's maybe been on the opposite end of the scale and feels completely oppressed. All of us come into it with a different lens, so I thought it would actually probably be beneficial for you to understand where I'm coming from, so that everything else I'm going to say is hopefully going to make more sense. So, a bit about me. I was actually born in Africa. I was born in Lesotho, which is a tiny country surrounded by another country called South Africa. And I was kind of born in the middle of nowhere. If you were to look at photos of me in my childhood, I used to live with my grandparents, and we literally lived somewhere where there was like so much land, and we were really far from, I would say, really big cities, kind of like London or Johannesburg or Cape Town or anything like that. When I was much younger, my biological father is Zimbabwean and my mother is from South Africa / Lesotho. When my parents split up, my dad was not in my life at all, and this was before I turned 1. And because my father wasn't around, my mom, in order for her to put food on the table, because I had an elder sister as well, she had to make a really difficult decision, and she moved away and she worked hours away, and I was raised with my grandmother, and my mom would send money so that my grandmother could look after me and my mom would come and visit me as often as she could, but I did not see her on a daily basis. Needless to say, when I was little, what I would love to do is I would absolutely love to watch football with my grandfather. And every weekend we would sit by the television, and at 3 years old I would stare at the TV and I would watch football from the Premier League, and I would say to my grandpa, one day I'm going to play football in England. Now, it made no sense how someone like me in Africa would be able to play football in England. I mean, I didn't have any relatives in England. I didn't have any friends in England. I didn't know anyone in England, and there was no link between my dream and it actually being a reality. I was just this child in Lesotho. But what ended up happening was that my mom ended up remarrying, and she ended up marrying my stepdad, who is a white Englishman. Now, he is as English as they come, and by that what I mean is that he always gets mad at me if I say, "Can I have some water?" He's like, "Water. It is water, not water." However, the reason why I have this funny accent is because English wasn't my first language. I only started to learn English, and we needed to move, and I needed to go into international schools that were teaching an American syllabus by American teachers. I learned English from watching American TV and trying to keep up with my fellow students at class. One of the things that I noticed when I went to international schools is that when I was born, it was around the time of apartheid, I was raised kind of surrounded by a lot of black people, even though my family, I had some cousins and stuff that were mixed. But it wasn't until I went into an international school that I actually started to see the diversity of the world. And so what was really cool was I would meet children and I would say, "Where are you from?" And they'd say, "Oh, I'm from Scotland." And when you're living in Ghana, you're like, "Scotland? Where's Scotland?" Or someone would say, "Oh, I'm from the Philippines," or "I'm from Australia," or "I'm from New Zealand," or "I'm from Denmark," or "I'm from Brazil," or "I'm from Nepal." It was like, wow, this is really, really cool. And so from that moment, I actually did not identify myself as black. So even though when I was in South Africa, there was definitely the white people, the black people, and there were also the mixed folks called colored. When I went to international school, I no longer identified myself as black, because instead we would ask each other about where we were from, our culture, our history. And so instead I would think about what country am I from, and I'd try and really be proud of my culture and my heritage. And so that's really kind of the perspective that really ended up being the basis of how I saw myself as an individual for the rest of my life. Moving on, I ended up moving to England, and when I moved to England, that's when things changed. I moved to an all-white neighborhood, basically. And I remember the first time I went into a class that was basically an all-white school, and I walked in and the kids just looked at me and they were very friendly, but the first thing they noticed was my hair and how different my hair was. And so I'd sit there in class and they'd start like poking at my ponytail and touching it, and if they would lift my hair and it would stick up, they'd be like, "Did you just see her hair?" And my hair became definitely a fascination point. And even though it was interesting to them, I wasn't bothered by it, because I knew that everyone came from different backgrounds. And so through my experience at international schools, I just felt like, whoa, it's just basically like meeting someone from Scotland or like someone from England, but multiply that times 30, in addition to not having any other diversity. Even though I was different, kids in my community, they were always very inclusive of me. I was always able to play with someone, until there was one guy who gave me my first outright racist experience, where he didn't like me playing with the other kids in the playground, and he spat on me, and he said to me, excuse my language, but he said to me, "Go home, you fucking packy." And then he spat at me. And I remember being really confused because I was about 9, and I thought, what is a packy? And he just spat on me. I've never knew that a human being thought it would be acceptable to spit on another human being because of the color of their skin. And so my sister ran up after him and she chased him and she told him to leave me alone, and he never bothered me ever again. Fortunately, my sister was a very strong black woman. Now, remember when I talked about how when I was a child, I had this dream about playing football in England? Well, now that I was in England, I thought, oh my gosh, this is it, this is my chance. And one of the things that I noticed was that for all my life, I had always been told that I couldn't do something. I can't play football because I'm a girl. I can't play football because I'm from Africa. Who's going to give me a chance? And there's always someone saying something about all the reasons why I couldn't do it. And one of the things that I noticed was that I actually didn't care about what other people said about me. I actually did not care whether people said that girls don't play football, you can't find a club. All the reasons they would give me for why I couldn't do what was in my heart, or what I felt God had essentially placed in my heart, I did not care. I just knew that I had this vision and no one was going to stop me. And so I would train as if all I needed was a chance. All I needed was someone to see my talent. I would watch the best footballers. I would read books about how they trained, what they did when they were children. I would look for soccer schools. I would look for any opportunity I could find to make my dream happen. I ended up getting scouted not only once by Manchester Football Club, but I also got scouted by a representative who knew an England football scout who was also on the board of the Southampton girls football team. So he called her, and you know, these were all white people. He called her and he said, you need to see this person. Her name is Jo, because at the time her name is Jo. I just had this realization when I said my name is Jo, that the reason why I changed my name from Rejoice, my full name has always been Rejoice, the reason why I changed my name from Rejoice to Jo is because when I moved to England, I won't say who, someone told me that if my name is Rejoice, I'm more likely to experience being bullied at school and that I should have a more English name. Jo. Isn't that interesting? So I went back to Joy when I turned 16 and I wanted to kind of own more of who I am. And I think I like the name Rejoice. I like the name Joy. What do you think? Do you like the name Joy? Do you like the name Rejoice? I think I look better as a Joy or as a Rejoice as opposed to a Jo. Let me know what you think. Anyways, I actually ended up getting scouted to playing football for Southampton Girls FC Football Club, later on joining Chelsea Girls Football Club. That ended up being essentially my journey into football and playing at the highest level for my age group. The reason why I start with this story is because this for me was the first time that I actually realized how society in so many ways can tell you whether you're a woman or whether you're black. They can give you all sorts of reasons for why you shouldn't do something. And I know that I'm probably not alone. Maybe you have been told by someone a reason why you shouldn't do something by something you can't help, such as your gender, such as your race, such as your African name, such as disability. There is always something that someone has to say is a reason why you can't do it. And I realized that if I had not overcome that you should fit and stay in that one box, I would never have trained myself to be good enough so that when there was an opportunity for me to get seen, someone was able to see it. So I was really glad that I had believed in myself, and I was really glad that I put in all that work, because all I was waiting for was just that one chance. And sometimes in your career and in your life, all you need is that one person who believes in you, or that one person who sees your talent, who gets your foot in the door. And that's something that I've always kept with me and have always tried to keep with me for the rest of my career. Now, moving on, I got injured. I ended up going to university, ended up graduating, ended up working as a marketing consultant for global brands from Unilever, Nike, L'Oreal to even smaller companies, really the breadth of them. Now, one of the things that I feel slightly embarrassed to say, I mean, not even slightly, I do feel embarrassed to say, I personally don't feel as though I have experienced a lot of the racism that people are talking about. Now, this is not a comment, please know that this is not a comment about what is happening in the world. I am not talking about the experiences that other women or other people have had, whether it's in America, whether it's in the UK. I'm making no comment about that whatsoever. I'm simply sharing a bit about my personal experience. A lot of the racism that people are talking about in the news, like the police brutality, fearing the police, I'm someone that's never feared the police in my life. When I see a police officer, 9 times out of 10, I kid you not, if I smile at them and I wave at them, the police officers, at least in England, they touch their hat and they nod and they smile back at me. A lot of the issues that are being discussed in terms of feeling like the system is stacked against you, in terms of that stuff, I do not feel as though I have personally experienced that. What I wish is, I wish we lived in a society where all of us, all black people, felt as though if there was anything you wanted to do with your career, with your life, you could get a chance and you could take that chance and you could achieve, you could work at organizations, you could progress in the organizations, maybe you could build your own company, you could get investment or funding from VC companies, maybe you could really explore whatever it is that you wanted to do with your life, and you felt as though you had as much of an opportunity as someone else who lived in a different neighborhood or someone else with a different skin color. Even though that is the objective, and even though that is something that I feel I have personally experienced, I feel embarrassed to say this because I guess in some ways I am afraid of someone calling me a black traitor. What I've noticed is that even though there is a term such as white privilege, there is also a term that I learned yesterday whilst I was on Instagram called white proximity. And I was like, what is white proximity? And I could be wrong, but someone defined it as, this is white proximity if you have grown up with white people, if you have lived in a white neighborhood, if you have a white husband like I do, and if you have mixed children like I do, then you have essentially been protected by white people, not because they care about black people, but because they happen to like you as an individual. Now, it is possible that maybe I have benefited from white proximity in some way. I'm not quite sure. But what I do know for sure is that one thing that I do is I do stand behind anyone who has experienced racism, because we do need to abolish that, period. I actually feel scared saying this because one of the things that I've noticed, I could be wrong, is that it seems as though there is only one black experience. And if you don't have it, well, then you aren't really black. So for example, if you're someone like myself who, even though I grew up in Africa, even though I am dark, I'm not light skinned, I couldn't pass as anything but black if people were to see me in an interview or to see me coaching their employees, everybody would know I am black. Despite all of that, I feel as though because I ended up marrying a white man, because I ended up being adopted by my stepdad who is white, because of that, it's almost as though my experience doesn't count. And I find that quite interesting, given that I feel as though as a black woman, I do not want to be told that my voice doesn't matter, which is hard because as a black woman, all I've ever wanted is to be accepted and for us to be equal. It feels kind of hard to be told that my voice doesn't matter unless I am saying or I have experienced the exact same things that other people have experienced. So I find that quite interesting because when I think about white people, I feel as though they don't all have the same experience. So for example, if you are a white person, like a white girl that is maybe the queen's child, and you would have a very different experience to someone who is white and was maybe born and raised in a council estate where maybe the parents didn't have that much money, where maybe the schooling system was different and you didn't have access to a good education. Maybe one of the parents died or was in prison or was in a really difficult situation, drugs, all sorts of things. And that person will also have a very different life experience to someone who's middle class, who maybe doesn't have as much money as the aristocrats or anything like that. And maybe they're not struggling as financially as someone who's in a council estate, but they are living paycheck to paycheck and they're doing whatever they can to support their children, but they have different issues and different challenges in their life experience. So I feel as though I wish we could acknowledge that within the black community, there are different experiences as a black person, and there's so many factors that might contribute to that. Now, I have shared with you the things that influenced my black experience, and I really wanted to kind of share this video to kind of share some of my thoughts on what I think could help. Now, I am not saying that I am a know-it-all on this issue. I feel like with race, we are all learning, we are all growing, and I would love to know if there is anything else that I haven't mentioned that is coming up that you think could also make a difference in really helping to move society forward. So if you have any additional ideas, please leave a comment in the box below. The only thing that I will request is that if you are leaving a comment is to please be kind. My name is Joy, and I love to feel joy no matter where I go and no matter what I do. Okay, so in terms of the things that I think could help, I'm gonna break it down into two categories. So one is if you are an employer or if you are a manager, and then I'm gonna create a separate separate list for people who are Black or are of minority. So let's talk about the employers. The first thing is to assume that you probably have unfair hiring or talent development practices. If I was to say to you, are you racist? Most of the time someone would say, of course I'm not racist. We assume that we aren't racist by default. However, if you assume that and you believe that 100%, then it's going to be very difficult for you to actually become aware and actually notice the things that you can improve in order to create more equality and actual diversity at work. Now, when I talk about diversity, I do want to flag something up. There is a difference between diversity and inclusion. Even though these terms tend to be used interchangeably, diversity is essentially having an organization where you have people that are different, having a breadth of perspective that can really help your company come up with better ideas, build better products, or deliver a better service. Inclusivity, however, inclusion is different in the respect that it's all about how do you create an organization that is inclusive of the different diversities. Now, it may seem that, well, of course we're including everyone, but one of the things that I've noticed is that just because one person in an organization is anti-racist, it doesn't mean that everyone in the organization is actually taking the right actions to create a context for equality. So for example, there are so many things that could affect hiring. When you're growing an organization, there are so many different pieces of the puzzle. There are the recruiters that might be coming in externally. There are the internal recruiters. They are the hiring managers. They are the people that are interviewing. Every single person that is involved in the hiring aspect can come into the hiring process with slightly different views or slightly different expectations, slightly different judgments on Black people, and that can actually end up affecting who gets hired in the first place. And then when it also comes to the development of Black talent, enabling studies have actually shown that even though Black women are 2.8 times more ambitious than white women in the respect that they aspire to reach a prestigious title, 44% feel stalled in organizations that are predominantly white, and 26% feel unrecognized by their superiors compared to white women. Now, what I find quite interesting is that in the work that I've done, I've noticed that it doesn't matter whether I'm working with clients who are literally at leading organizations, which I'm not going to mention any names, but they are working at leading organizations that even you and I know you most definitely have heard of them, that one of the most common complaints that I've received is that even though I've gotten the job at this place, I feel as though people are out to get me. I feel as though people are sabotaging me. I feel as though people don't want me to do well. And that has been the resounding feedback that I've received from pretty much every Black female client that I've worked with that is playing at that high level. Once they try to get really high in the company, that they essentially get stuck and they don't get any further. So I think it's really important for organizations. It's not going to be enough just to hire them. You're also going to have to work on how you can make it easier for them to progress if they are talented and they're actually showing that they're capable of doing the job. So this could be things like effective mentoring, sponsorship, or even providing role models that make it easier for them to see how to navigate and really progress within the organization. Essentially, there are things that you can do because a Black person's experience within your organization may actually be a little bit different to someone who is white or non-Black. The second thing is to let go of the stereotype of what a Black person is. Now, this is probably one of the things that I found the most frustrating. There seems to be a presumption of what being Black means. I don't quite know what being Black means, and I certainly don't want to mock or make a joke of what people say the stereotype Black person is, because frankly, I think it's rude. I do believe that being Black, what does that really mean? You are Black is your skin color. However, if you were to talk to someone in Nigeria and you were to talk to them about their life and their views on society and in the world, it might be different to someone who was maybe born and raised in the Bronx in New York, who might have a different perspective to someone who maybe grew up in London, or to a Black person who grew up in Salisbury like I did. or someone who grew up in the Caribbean. There are so many people that have totally different experiences that I feel as though that there seems to be this one stereotype of what it means to be black. And often the black stereotype is someone who is maybe less educated, is maybe very African, even though what do they even really mean by African? Kind of like if they look at your name on your CV and they think, oh, this person must be very African. What does that mean? Africa is a continent, it's not even a country. Or that maybe you're not smart. And that's one thing, is that I wish that we would kind of break down those stereotypes, because one thing is for sure, there are black people who are successful. There are black people that have a lot of money. There are black people who are extremely educated, very talented, very hardworking, and would actually make incredible employees and be a real great asset to your team. Like, I'll give you an example of one stereotype. Once I went in for an interview, and often when people hear my voice, they think I'm a white person. In fact, a lot of the black friends I've had would make a joke that when they spoke to me on the phone, they said, you talk like a white person. When I hear you on the phone, I don't even think you're black. And I'm like, what does that really even mean?
Obviously, I'm black.
Why does being black mean that you have to sound a certain way? I never quite understood that. When I think about a white person, there's no white man voice. There are people that are Russians, there are people that are Italians, there are people that are English, there are people that are from Yorkshire or from Liverpool or from different parts of London. They all have different accents, and yet it seems as though if you're black, you really only have one accent, which I thought was quite interesting. So I think let's just let go of the stereotypes and really try and assess them and analyze their skills based on the work they've done, rather than your judgment of what you think a black person can produce. The third thing is, don't hire someone because they're black. Hire them because you genuinely believe they're good. One of the things that I find very frustrating is when I feel as though some recruitment managers or some people might be trying to hire someone to tick a box. And I was thinking about university. My dad, who's English, as I mentioned, he said to me, oh, you should apply to Oxbridge. Oxbridge are looking for black people. And I remember being like, you know what? Simply because he said that, I chose not to apply. And the reason for that is because I thought, I don't want someone to admit me into a university, or I don't want someone to hire me simply because they are looking for black people. I want someone to hire me or to admit me into the university because they've looked at my grades, they've looked at my work, they've looked at the impact I've made in previous organizations, they've looked at my talent, and they've thought, you know what, this person would be a great addition to the team. The reason I say this is because it's all about respect. Respecting each other as human beings that are talented. And if when you are evaluating candidates, you're trying to assess who is going to be the best person for the team, I think it would be awesome for teams and organizations to know that every single black person that has worked there because they are exceptional, just like everybody else, and they belong on that team. And unless an organization really stands for that, it's quite easy for some black people to be brought in, but there's still some resistance, because some people could say, well, you only really got the job because, you know, we just needed a black person, and that's you. The fourth thing is knowing that beauty and success comes in all shades of black. The reason that I say this is because I'm going to be vulnerable and share that I feel kind of embarrassed to say this, but here we go again, another embarrassment, is that I, as a darker skinned woman, have never really felt that beautiful. It's taken me a long time to actually be really confident in my skin. You might be thinking, how's this relevant to work? But just hang in there with me. So growing up, I would always see on TV, magazines, really just any kind of media or books, even books, that they always had white characters. Even in video games, I'm obsessed with video games. They always had white characters. Even in The Sims, did any of you play The Sims? They would always have so many shades of white people, but with a black person, it would be like this really ugly red color. And I thought, I'm pretty sure that black people aren't red. It seemed as though there were many images of what beauty could look like, but if you were black, you weren't included in that variety. And I felt as though if you were dark, the darker you were, the less beautiful you are. There's like skin brightening creams. This belief ended up being there with me. For example, once I had a job and I was working for this fashion company, and it was kind of an internship before I graduated from university. And there was this networking event to launch this shoe collection, and everyone there was white. I was in a really nice property in Notting Hill, in a really nice area. Everybody there was really well off, very successful, very intelligent, and I was the only black person in the room. And I felt as though I was totally out of my element. Even though I went to private schools when I moved to the UK, even though I grew up in a white neighborhood, even though I ended up having a white stepdad, fundamentally, in my core, I felt as though I didn't belong there. And the reason why I felt I didn't belong there was because I looked so different. And it kind of, I would have almost felt safer being the cleaner or being the worker who was at that party than actually being someone who was there. Now, I ended up working with a coach and ended up realizing that a lot of the stuff that I was feeling was beliefs that I had built over time without really even processing that I developed those beliefs. No one in that party said anything to exclude me. No one in that party did anything to exclude me, but there were definitely beliefs that I had fostered myself. Now, moving on to now I no longer hold that belief. Now I can go to a networking event and I can try and own it. And the reason why I mention this is that even though this might seem unrelated, it's actually still quite linked, which is that often when companies are hiring people, whether they're hiring someone for a job externally or whether you're looking to see who can be an executive or be a leader in your organization, often we have an image of what success looks like. And that image may be varied in that we may think it could be male. More recently, we're thinking it could be female. And we're thinking, oh, this person has to have this type of education, they have to have this type of background. There's usually an image of who we think will do really well in a job, when in reality, sometimes that image does not include a black person. There have been so many studies that show that if you ask children to draw a picture of what a scientist looks like, what an engineer looks like, what an executive looks like, what a leader looks like, more often than not, they're not going to draw a black person. More often than not, they will draw who they've seen to hold positions like that in the past. And because we don't have a significant number of black people in executive positions, it's going to be very difficult to even see black people as being really good at those positions because there aren't very many people doing it. So we actually need to understand that success and beauty, it comes in all shades. The fifth thing is also to create a culture where black women can embrace their natural form. The reason that I say this is that I feel as though I'm kind of coming out. So a lot of black people always know that, for example, I'm wearing a wig, but if I go to a work event or if I go and I connect with people that aren't black, most people think it's my hair. And one of the things that I've noticed is that if you're working in a certain type of corporate environment, it's actually quite easy to feel as though to fit in, you need to change your hairstyle. So for me, I always opt for wigs. Now, personally, I love wigs. But the reality is that I do have natural hair, and on a separate note, I did actually cut all my natural hair off. It's a whole separate issue that I'm not going to talk about now. Maybe I'll talk about in a separate video, but I cut most of my hair because I wanted to see what I'd look like kind of bald. Just wanted to say hi and I hope you're having a good day. My mom was totally freaked out by my hair. She was just like, you look like a completely different person. Even though that's my natural hair, I've never consulted, coached, worked with anyone. I've never gone to any job wearing my natural hair, partly because even though I know I'm different, I never wanted to stand out. I always felt as though if you had really curly African hair, people stare at it. People don't think you look as professional. So I didn't know if this was factually the case. I didn't have any research or data to back it up, but it was definitely a feeling that I had. Unless we accept black women in the respect of in all shades, but also even to the root of whether they wear their natural hair, it's going to be very difficult for us to actually create an environment that embraces black women as it does embrace women that are of a different ethnicity. So that's that part done. Now let's talk about applicants and talent. These tips are for you if you are Black or you are of an ethnic minority and you're either looking for a job or you do have a job and you're trying to progress in your role, and maybe you have big aspirations for your career and you want to achieve it. So these are kind of my 6 things that I think could really help us move forward in society. Now, the first thing is let go of the belief that you can't get the job because you are Black. Often the thing that stops us from reaching our full potential is not what other people say we can or can't do, but it's actually what we personally believe that we can or can't do with our lives. I do acknowledge that there is racial bias. I do acknowledge that there are some people who are difficult to work with. I do acknowledge that you do have to work harder as a Black person. However, that does not mean that you can't. And the reason I say can't implies that it's not gonna happen. That no matter what you do, no matter what you learn, no matter how you try, it's just not gonna happen for you. Holding this belief and believing it in your heart, you will shut yourself down before you even see yourself sprint. You will shut yourself down before you even are able to notice yourself fly. And one of the things that I've noticed, kind of similar to the story that I mentioned when I was much younger, was that even though there were so many people telling me that I shouldn't play football and that my dream of playing football in the Premier League was impossible as a kid from the middle of nowhere in Africa who didn't even have a visa to live in the UK, I believed it was possible. And by me believing it was possible, I was able to work on the things that I could control. I could control how talented I was. I could control how many hours I trained. I could control how I trained by learning from the best through books, magazines, any free resources I could get. And from that, when someone was able to actually give me an opportunity, I was able to take it. A stronger belief to hold is it does not matter what anyone else says. It does not matter who tries to stand in my way, because what is in my destiny is going to happen for me. And if you believe in God, what God has put in your heart and God has put in your journey for you to achieve, it's gonna happen, and no weapon formed against you will prosper. So that is something that I believe in my heart, and that has definitely helped me progress in my career to the point that not only am I doing this as a profession, but I actually do work with leading organizations. I'm not going to mention any names, but I do work with leading organizations that literally have offices across the countries that have thousands of employees. One client I worked with actually has over 80,000 employees. And there I was, the only Black person there coaching and mentoring their executives who are basically all white on female talent. The second thing is to explore career opportunities that you might not have thought about in the past. I feel as though within the Black community, there isn't enough conversation on what types of professions are we going into. For example, the tech industry, it's booming. STEM fields, booming. They're looking for lots of women. They're looking for diversity. And yet, when I think about it, I was having a chat. So I've worked in tech, I have friends in tech. When I talk to all my friends in tech and I ask them, how many Black software engineers do you know? They're like, there's not many. And yet what I feel is that if you are actually a really talented Black person in a field that a lot of Black people don't go into, what I find quite fascinating is that hiring managers and people can be like, oh my gosh, this person is different. And they actually really embrace that difference. So definitely when you're thinking about your career opportunities is to look beyond what you have seen as possible for someone like you. I had a conversation with a client the other day who said that when she moved to the UK, her family and her friends and community were telling her to work as a care worker because that's what they were familiar with. That's what they thought was possible. It wasn't until she thought about God or the universe had blessed her with. It wasn't until that she decided, you know what, I don't care what anyone is telling me that I can or can't do with my life. I know what I want to do. And she ended up getting hired to work at one of the leading companies in tech, which is incredible. And she actually has a senior position there, which is also incredible. And she would not have done that had she not been exposed to the tech industry through her husband who was working in the tech industry, and now she has a really great career doing something that she loves. So I would say definitely explore different career paths that maybe you haven't seen many Black people do in the past, but just because many Black people haven't done them in the past, it doesn't mean that you can't succeed. The third thing isn't really so much limited to Black people, but if you're doing a career or you're in a profession that you don't love, and by love, I mean you aren't obsessed with it, because if you want to be the best at what you do, it really helps if you are genuinely obsessed with it, because it's your passion, you love it, you can't stop thinking about it. And people who are obsessed with something end up doing more work and end up being better at it because it is their obsession. Now, if you find that your career is not something you're obsessed with, I'd say pause and really think about what do you want to do with your life? What's the meaning that you want to take out of the experiences that you've had? What kind of impact do you want to make in the world? How much of your potential do you want to discover that you can fulfill? However, to do that, it's really important that you are receptive to what you believe in your heart you're meant to be doing. Now, the easiest way to do that is to meditate, is to talk to universe or to God. I don't know what your beliefs are, and I don't mind what your beliefs are, but talk to the universe or God and ask for signs on what you should be doing with your career. Because if you're aligned with God, and if you're aligned with the universe, more doors open for you than if you aren't aligned with that. The fourth thing is to find stories of Black people who have succeeded. I feel as though it's very easy to focus on the narrative that only white people succeed, or white people have it way easier than Black people. Even though there are some facts for that, what I tend to do is I tend to focus on who in this world has actually been able to overcome the obstacles I'm facing. Who in this world has actually been able to achieve their full potential despite the challenges they've had. I'm fascinated by Black people or minorities or females who have been able to overcome. I find that fascinating, I find that motivating, I find that inspiring, and that always gives me a different perspective. That always gives me that, oh, this is possible. I simply need to learn the skills and the way to overcome this. There are kind of tactful, nuanced ways to handle it, and it can be really helpful to actually understand from other Black people how they overcame the challenges they've experienced. The fifth thing that I'd say is to get educated. When we talk a lot about racism, one of the first things people will say is get educated on the facts, get educated on the history, get educated on that. Well, one of the things that we also need to talk about is how we as individuals also need to get educated on how to progress in today's work environment. Even though we may aim towards a world where there is more equality, it's not going to be a change that's going to happen overnight. Even if it was a change that was to happen overnight, the fact of the matter is that getting hired for an amazing job and getting the best job opportunities is a skill. When it is a really competitive role and there are very good candidates, there is actually a skill to getting hired. For example, the average person who's looking for a job, when they are interviewing, they have a 20% success rate, meaning that they might have to do up to 5 job interviews in order for them to get 1 job offer. However, once you learn the skill of how to write your applications, how to get noticed by companies, how to cold email companies and get them calling you, how to pass your interviews, once you actually have that skill and you really know how to do it, well then you're able to have a much higher success rate and not only turning job opportunities into job offers, but you're also able to really achieve amazing things with your career. So for example, even though I mentioned that the average person's interview success rate is 20%, and even though I'm a Black person, my success rate is actually 85% on average. So of all the interviews that I've done in my life, I've calculated that of all the interviews that I've had, and I've had quite a few, I've actually received job offers from 85% of those job interviews, which actually isn't that common. Getting a job is a skill. The other thing that also really makes a difference is knowing how to move up in an organization. One of the things that has really made it difficult for people to progress within a company is not having stakeholder management or having a stakeholder influence. Now, one of the easiest ways to do that is to make sure that you build relationships with the key decision makers in your organizations, and they are backing you or they are sponsoring you. That is a skill that not everyone has. And often the people who are able to climb the ranks higher, it's not because they're just hardworking and they're keeping their head down and they're working really hard. They're turning up to work on time. Maybe they're leaving later. Maybe they're putting in more effort. Often the people who progress aren't necessarily the hardest working, but they are people who know how to network and use office politics in order to get to a more senior position. Now, one of the things that I've noticed is that of all the clients that I've worked with, I've seen a pattern in which the reason why they feel stalled, or the reason why they feel people are out to get them, is because they don't actually have relationships with the key decision makers or the key people who are influencing their progression in their organization. And there is a skill you can learn to better build those relationships. It's kind of like dating. Having an amazing marriage or having an amazing relationship or finding an amazing partner isn't something that just happens because you deserve it. Even though we all deserve to be loved, even though we all deserve to be treated in the best way possible, the reality is that relationships are a lot of hard work, and relationships do require that we do some work on ourselves, that the other person does some work on themselves too, and that we are able to communicate in a way that helps our relationship grow. And even though this is the same in marriage, it also works in the work environment. So I definitely think do everything you can to learn about stakeholder management, because if you do that, it can really, really make a difference. And so if you're looking for a pay increase, or if you're looking to negotiate, make sure that you negotiate. All of these things around your pay, around whether you progress, all of these are skills you can learn and you can develop. I am going to try and make more videos on how to do this, because I've noticed that I haven't really talked about this issue before, and I feel perhaps this is my thing. This is one thing that I can do to best support Black women or people that are in a minority in progressing at work. If you have any other suggestions for other videos or resources or challenges that you've had that you would really like me to talk on and really provide support on, please let me know in the comment box below. Anyways, so that's it. That's my long video on the Black Lives Matter issue. I don't know how you're feeling at the end of this video. I hope it's given you some thought on what you can do as an individual. It doesn't matter whether you're white and you're a manager, or you're influential in the recruitment or the development of talent in your organization, or if you're even just managing one person. And if you are a Black woman like myself, or if you are of an ethnic minority, I hope I've given some ideas that can really inspire you on things you can do to feel powerful in this situation. One of the things that has really, really gotten me down when I think about the Black Lives Matter movement is feeling separate, feeling as though there is white and there is Black. And as a mother of a mixed child, it's difficult, because I wish we lived in a world where, yes, I'm Black, yes, my husband's white, but there isn't such a divide between us in terms of how people perceive us or our life experiences or anything like that. And what's fascinating is that even though I have my experience, my child will have her own experience. For example, my husband and I are planning on sending her to private schools. So we had to look around as many private schools as we could. It was quite scary for me. I know it's not the same type of racism that some people have experienced, but as a mother of a mixed child, I was really, really sad when we were walking around the school and there weren't even really any mixed children, let alone Black children. And we're living in this like really white neighborhood. And one of the kids points at my daughter's hair and she's like, "Oh my God, she looks just like so-and-so." So I said, "Who's this other child that you're referring to?" And they pointed at one girl who was in the class, and that one girl was mixed. And she goes, "They look just like each other." And I said, "Oh, do they?" So yeah, they have the same hair. And I just thought, that's interesting. When my daughter was just a year old, even at that age, the children were seeing a difference between her and them, even though my daughter happens to be fairly light-skinned for a mixed child, but they could see that she had different hair. You know, she takes my kind of hair. Another one, I was at the park and my daughter and I were just chilling on the mat, and there's this Black guy who lives in this neighborhood that I live in, and there's not many Black people that live in this neighborhood, so when we see each other we definitely talk and we get to know each other and we exchange numbers because we really want to keep that relationship going. He had two children, one 8-year-old daughter and one 4-year-old boy. And the 8-year-old girl said to me, "What color is your husband?" And I said, "What?" She said, "What color is your husband?" I said, "What race is he?" She says, "Yeah, what color is your husband?" And I said, "He's white." And she goes, "Oh, so your baby's mixed?" I was like, "Yeah." She goes, "Oh." I thought, that's interesting. So I know that my child is going to have her own unique experience with her own journey. And that scares me a little bit because I am very familiar with what it's like to be Black and growing up where I grew up, where I live. And that is definitely something I can, if I had a Black child, I could talk to them about. But now I've got a mixed child and I have no idea what is going to be her experience. And I really wish we lived in a world where, regardless of whether your child was Black, or regardless of whether your child was mixed, or regardless of whether your child was from Pakistan or from India or from Poland or from Italy or from somewhere in South America, like regardless of where your child was from, you felt as though you could go to school, you could make friends, and you wouldn't be left out because of where you're from, or you wouldn't be picked on because of how you talk, or you wouldn't look different in a bad way because of the fact that you are different. I wish we lived in a world where we could all embrace our differences. So yeah, so I'm feeling a little bit sad about that, but I am hoping that by us having this conversation, we'll be able to shift things and we can create a society where it might not be for my daughter's lifetime, maybe it will be, but hopefully we will reach a lifetime where this issue is a thing of the past and we look at it from a historical standpoint rather than an issue that is still very much in the present. Anyways, that's it from this week's video. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. If you think other people need to see this video, please share it with people that you think might value it. And I shall speak to you soon. All right, bye.